You're losing ground every single week, not because your strategy is wrong, not because the market is against you, not because you're working the wrong number of hours, but because the path between where you are and where you want to go has no structure. The vision is there, but the connective tissue between them, the quarterly, the monthly, the weekly, the daily actions you and your team need are missing. And every day it's missing, the gap widens. In one of the months earlier in this year, you and your leadership team probably got together and spent a full day offsite. Whiteboard on the wall, 3-year targets, annual priorities, clear initiatives, and everyone walked out feeling aligned. But by March, nobody had opened the documents that you created. The quarterly review was never actually scheduled. The monthly check-in became status updates about whichever squeaky wheel was getting the grease that week. And Monday morning looks exactly the same as it did before the offsite. A calendar full of meetings that do not connect to anything on that whiteboard. More and more rocks seem to be getting added to the board, and meetings are getting held for the sake of actually having meetings, but the needle never actually moves. The vision didn't fail. The cadence between the vision and this week just never existed. This is not a strategy problem. This is a rhythm problem, and it costs more than just bad strategy because the leader does not even realize that the drift is happening until they look up and the entire quarter has already passed. Now here's the thing. There are 7 planning timeframes that leaders need to operate at simultaneously. Not in order, but literally simultaneously. Lifetime, 3-year, 1-year, quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily. And most leaders are fluent in only 2, the big one and the small one. But here's the problem. Those 2 are just bookends. Think of it this way. The big 2, your lifetime or your 3-year goal, help to set the direction. Where are we going and what does success actually look like? The smaller 2, your weekly and your daily, drive the actions and what needs to actually happen today, this week. But the 3 in the middle, the 1 year, the quarterly, the monthly, those are the translation layer between those 2 bookends. And they take the direction and turn it into this year's objectives, this quarter's priorities, the main effort for this month, this week's non-negotiables, and today's actual actions. So without that middle 3, the bookends never actually speak to each other. The vision stays on the whiteboard. The clock continues to tick. The failure point is almost always the same. It's the ability to effectively brief and debrief at the various different levels, at the various different timeframes. And the leader with no quarterly review has no mechanism to actually check whether the year is tracking towards the 3-year. The leader with no monthly checkpoint has no mechanism to check whether this month is tracking towards this quarter. Pull out an effective brief and debrief at the various timeframes, and the whole translation layer simply collapses. The annual vision becomes decoration, and the weekly calendar becomes random. Briefing and debriefing are paramount. As a leader, you really only need to brief and debrief on 3 core areas. Let's look at the briefing side of things first. First, what's the current state of the team? This consists of measuring the team's morale, their mindset, and their physical preparedness for whatever time frame is actually coming up. Have we burned them out or are they ready to go? Second, what's the gap between where you are and where you actually want to be? This is where you identify the constraints that are holding you back and you develop the plan to actually close the gap. This becomes your main effort and likely the supporting efforts for whatever time frame you're actually working on. Third, what's your intent for that time frame? Intent consists of 3 things. It consists of your purpose, the why. What's the purpose behind what you're asking the team to actually accomplish, and how does it tie into the actual bigger picture? The method, what exactly needs to happen? Not at a tedious task by task, not a micromanaging level, but at a high level of what actually needs to get done. And the end state, what does success actually look like? How will your team know when they've achieved the goal? That's it. 3 core areas of the brief to set the direction and close the gap. A reflective look back on those areas and any adaptations that need to be made based on data, and an iterative process so you continue to improve. 3 areas, and most leaders cannot tell you the last time that they looked at all 3. They skip it because they're too busy executing to plan. That, in and of itself, is the trap. The busier the leader, the more they need to brief and debrief at each time frame, and the less likely they are to actually schedule the time and do it. The smallest unit of planning rhythm compounds is the weekly review. Not the Monday morning scramble to figure out what needs to happen this week, but a structured 20 minutes, same time, every week, 3 core areas. It's the same 3 areas that I talked about before, and the state of the team, the gap, and the intent. That's it. 3 areas, 20 minutes. Compounded over 52 weeks, that weekly iterative loop is more valuable than any annual planning retreat that you will ever do. Now, I learned a lot about this when I was actually in the sales side of things. From the Marine Corps, I learned about briefing and debriefing, but as a salesperson, you learn the importance of pre-call planning or briefing and post-call debriefing or debriefing. So when you take those 2 things, all great salespeople who are great at creating revenue and driving customer interactions know to do those 2 things, pre-call planning or briefing and post-call debriefing. You do the same thing as a leader. You brief, determine what those core 3 areas are, and then you debrief on how well it went, what adaptations you need to make, and you iterate on the process. And here's what it looks like when you're actually running that cadence. In the Wednesday morning meeting, you review your 3-year targets. And at your quarterly last month, you know this quarter's 3 priorities by heart because you set them yourself. Your monthly review last week told you that priority 2 may be behind. So this week's calendar has 2 blocks dedicated specifically to getting priority 2 back on track. Your team knows how to adapt to those changes because they understand the intent of what it is that you're actually wanting to accomplish. You didn't have to think about that work. You just went in and did it. The cadence already decides it for you. And that in and of itself is the goal for what planning should actually look like. The goal is to move from planning mode to execution mode so fast that the 2 become indistinguishable. And when you have reviewed the annual, the quarterly leads into the monthly to this week, and the week into the morning, you know exactly what needs to happen today. The decisions that are made are already done, so there's no decision required. You just execute. That is what an operating rhythm buys you. Not more time, more clarity. So go back to that Monday morning. Is what you did this week connected to something that will actually matter this year? Go back to an offsite that you've done recently, the whiteboard, the 3-year targets you wrote earlier in this year. Is this week advancing any of those? If the answer is yes, great, good job. But keep building the cadence that makes that consistent. If the answer is no, or you're just not sure, that is your signal. Not that what you worked on is wrong, but that the connective tissue is actually the vision without the cadence is a wish. The calendar without the vision is just a bunch of busy work. You need both the vision and the cadence. 7 time frames, the weekly review with them, and the briefing structure that connects all of them, that is just one piece of what it takes to be adaptable in today's market. And if you want to know how you score in each of the 4 core areas, get your adaptability score at the link below. It'll take you probably about 10 minutes to actually complete, but you'll walk away with not only a score in each of the core 4 areas, but you'll walk away with specific action steps that you can take this week. So click the link, and I'll see you on the next video.